Yeah, I am Janet Buning, Vice President of Programs for Women's City Club, and I am delighted to welcome you all tonight for what I think is a very, very special evening. We have as our guest tonight, our speaker tonight, Hamilton County Sheriff Charmaine McGuffey, who has had a very long and wonderful career in law enforcement that she's going to tell us about. But more to the point, she has made a significant difference in her time as major at the Hamilton County Justice Center and now as sheriff. And those are some of the things that we hope to learn more about during the program tonight. Before we get into the program too seriously, and before he gets too busy with other duties, I would like to also introduce you to Jeff Dye, who is our Women's City Club president. Jeff wants to say a few words.
Welcome to this forum. I'm really excited that we're having this one. It's really exciting that we're having not only this forum, but then the upcoming tour of the jail, which will be talked about later. Actually, the Hamilton County Justice Center is probably a better term for that. So we're really looking forward to that event as well. Also, everybody make sure that you've already bought your tickets for the National Speaker Forum, which is selling very well. And I think Beth is going to put something in the chat with details about that
Oh, good.
coming up
Okay.
on, remember, we talked about that. So I think that's on Friday, the 22nd
Yes.
of March and at Memorial Hall. So that's with Jen White, who's the host of 1A, which a lot of you listen to on NPR. So we're really looking forward to that event. It's going to be really impressive. So I'm not going to say any more. I will hand it back to Janet to move us forward.
Okay, just a few of our usual housekeeping items before we get into the program itself. Just for those who just have joined in progress, I want you to know that Jeff is recording the program. We do that so we can keep it, archive it, and post it on our website so you can link to it on YouTube and watch it again or share it with someone who wasn't able to attend tonight. So we are being recorded. I do again want to encourage everyone who's comfortable doing so to be visible. So when Susan and Charmaine are conversing, that you feel like we're all part of the conversation, not just empty boxes on the screen. But at the same time, I'd like to ask you to please mute yourself so we don't have any inadvertent background noise going on. So if you want to mute yourself until it's time later in the evening for interaction, we would appreciate that a lot. Jeff has already told you about some of the upcoming events, so I don't have to go into that. I think just wanted to let you know the program is scheduled to be a conversation between Sheriff McGuffey and Susan Noonan until about 8 o'clock, and then we will have, we hope, a very lively question and answer session with all of you. Meanwhile, during the program, if you get a question, you all know how to use the chat box, right? So go to chat and put something in chat if there's something you want, a comment you want to make, a question you want to ask. You don't have to wait until 8 o'clock to say it. Put it in chat. I will be paying attention to that, monitoring that, and sharing that with Susan and with Charmaine. And I think that covers all the important details that we need to cover. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Susan Noonan, who has been, I think, everything in Women's City Club, a past president, chair of the Season Good Luncheon, chair of our Women's Expo, of Thriving Cincinnati. She's been the vice president, I think, of everything. She's also had a very long career of her own in criminal justice. So she and Charmaine have a lot in common, things they can talk about and share with you tonight. And that's why I've asked her to be kind of our Oprah Winfrey for the night, if you will, and to be the person who's actually in conversation with Charmaine. So Susan, I'd like to turn it over to you to have you say a few more words about yourself and introduce our illustrious speaker.
Thank you, Janet. Please do not compare me to Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, come on, you're better. You're better.
Really, I want Charmaine to do most of the talking, but I will start off by saying that we both have about 35 years in law enforcement, because I think she started as a sheriff in 89, or in the sheriff's department in 89, and I started doing police community relations back in 88. And so we have a lot in common. I've seen a lot of changes in the criminal justice system. in Hamilton County and the city of Cincinnati. And, I went through 7 police chiefs and only 3 sheriffs in my tenure and doing things in criminal justice. So I do have to say, I think it's really exciting that we have 2 women, one as chief of police and one as the sheriff, because they are doing absolutely incredible things to improve our local criminal justice systems. So tell you a little bit about Charmaine, because I want her to talk about some of the incredible things she has done, not just her past. So I'm going to give you a little history of her past. She's a lifelong Cincinnatian. As I said, a 35-year veteran of Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. Prior to being elected sheriff in 2020, she held the rank of sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and major. Sheriff McGuffey took office as sheriff on January 4th, 2021. So she's been there for 3 years, and she's the highest ranking woman in the history of Hamilton County, Ohio Sheriff's Office. So she's worked in almost every facet of the Sheriff's Office. Academy commander for the Ohio Peace Officers Corrections Academy, lead hostage negotiator for the Sheriff's Special Response Team, which is an amazing job, commander of the Sheriff's Honor Guard. She's provided training for law enforcement officers throughout the state. She has become actually a national model, and so has some of the things that she has done. But during her tenure as major of the jail and the court services, she was credited with leading reforms to reduce the likelihood of people returning to jail. She was also credited with bringing the jail from the worst ranking in the state of Ohio to the top ranking. So as Major, Sheriff McGuffey was named Local and Regional Law Enforcement Officer of the Year. She's been honored by as Public Citizen of the Year by the Ohio National Association of Social Workers. She was in the Cincinnati Enquirer's list of professional women to watch, and in the Business Courier's women who mean business. But I also know that last year she was one of the distinguished alumni at the University of Cincinnati in the College of Criminal Justice, Education, Information Services, and Human Services. So she is a reformer. She's an effective leader committed to moving our justice system from one of hard incarceration to one that offers opportunities for rehabilitation. She's committed to public safety, with the community as the foundation of the work, community engagement, and as the foundation of the work in the Sheriff's Office. So I'm going to get her started, but I wanted to just mention one thing that she has done, of which I have had the honor to be a part. She started first ever community engagement board, which is 10 people from a very diverse and cross section of the community. All of us have lived or worked in Hamilton County, and we are sort of an advisory board. It's the first community engagement that the Sheriff's Office has ever done in its existence. And so it's really an incredible accomplishment for Charmaine and an incredible honor for those of us that are serving on that, because we learn all about what's going on. We give advice. We talk about what's happening in the community. It's a real effort to be transparent and share mutual respect. So let's get started with Charmaine. And you have so much that you can talk about. I mean, it's not like I really have to ask you questions. So let's start with some of the things that you've done since you became sheriff.
Well, since I became sheriff, well, first of all, I'll start out with, when I was running for sheriff, before I took office in 2021, I noted to the public many different things that were going to be on my agenda as sheriff. And I'm very proud to say that after 3 and not quite, 4 years, I have accomplished all of the things that I said I wanted to do. And, one of the main things I came in with was, a culture change. I needed to engineer a culture change in this environment, in the jail, law enforcement, court services, in our uniformed ranks. And, when I was asked about that by a local reporter, well, how long do you think it's going to take for you to, create this culture change in this whole department? I mean, we do have 900 deputies. I said about a month, if that, right? And I meant it. And that's exactly what I did. We are in a paramilitary organization. And in a paramilitary organization, the leader pushes down agendas, policy, procedure, and sets the tone across the board for what everyone that's wearing this uniform is going to do. Now, granted, I had to fire a few guys when I came on because they were doing the wrong thing. They were inappropriate. They'd used excessive force. And then I began to change policy and oversight. I mean, that's the other thing, we had to have oversight, and the kind of oversight that holds accountability, for these officers. And, we made changes, and I'm very happy to say that our use of force numbers, our excessive use of force numbers are just, tremendously improved. And, use of force in general is down. The other thing I did was make sure that our restraint chair was not going to be used inappropriately. And that's something that was happening here at this facility. I rewrote the policy, and I am very proud to say that we have remedied that situation. I brought on the Community Affairs Board, and the Community Affairs is Major Jackie Reed. I promoted the first African American woman to major in the history of this department, put her in charge of community affairs, and she has done a tremendous job of outreach and bringing the public in and so forth. Something else that I had pledged to do was to improve the conditions for the prisoners here in our jail, and I've certainly done that. Paying attention to what their medical grievances are, making sure that they get the care and they need while they are in custody. And, I tour that jail, and it's a very different feel. I insist that our officers take a rehabilitative view of what it is they're doing and when they're working with these people that are incarcerated. I did, as Susan said, create the Community Service Board so that our Community Affairs Board is made up of Black, white, Democrat, Republican, a whole cross section of our tri-state, of our Hamilton County, 10 people in all, who I, gave them complete transparency so that they could see into our organization, and they could be a part of what our decision making is going to be. So I also, one of the things I did is create, a very strong addiction services program, and it's getting stronger and stronger. We're using medicated assisted treatment. We're doing things like we have a new build out we're getting ready to open up that is going to be specifically designed to work with men and women who struggle with addiction. And I'm going to do the same thing to mirror that with mental health. I pledged that accountability, transparency, and integrity would be a part and would be, in fact, crucial to the mission here at the Sheriff's Office. And I've accomplished all of those things. Something else I'm very proud of is the budget. I made the statement that I am going to operate within our budget of the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. Because when you go over budget and you are a county organization, you hurt the other county organizations, and you're not managing well when you continue to overspend on your checkbook. We all know that from managing our own households. My predecessor, the prior sheriff, he was $25 million over budget over an 8-year period. I brought that budget within line in 1 year, the first year I was here. And I continued that into the second year and this third year. So, I'm very proud of the strides that we've made here at the Sheriff's Office and the way that we've fixed the infrastructure of the jail. So as I talk about all these things, what you're realizing is that we have been working so very hard in these last 3 years, nonstop, to get us to a point where we can finally just kind of exhale a little and say, okay, what's on the next tier? what else is coming that we need to be gearing up for.
Well, do you want me to ask you a question?
Sure. I mean, you can, yeah, or I can just.
Were you just pausing?
Oh, I was just pausing, and you can ask me questions. I wanted to make sure that that as I cover these things, if there are any points that you want me to elaborate on or talk about, I can do that. So what I'll start with next is, the Justice Center itself. Our jail is very unique in the fact that we are the third largest jail in the state of Ohio. Right now, our population is pretty consistent, around 1,200 prisoners. And, those prisoners are men and women, many of them, unfortunately, who have some pretty high-level crimes. Because I have to tell you, criminal justice reform is taking hold, and Republicans, Democrats, everybody is on board with reforming the criminal justice system. Fiscally, it was costing us a tremendous amount of money to incarcerate people who some did not need to be incarcerated. Others needed to be actually, assisted in their lives with the things they struggle with so that they don't come back to jail and we don't have to support them in the incarcerated environment. And what we're seeing now, it's a trend, and that is felonies. I mean, we are holding a lot of men and women here who are charged with felonies, and many of those felonies are murder. We have murder, attempted murder, aggravated assault. We have a different population today than years past. I mean, our population today is a collection of different types of felonies that are very, very serious. And, we are adjusting to that. That's something you do in the criminal justice system. The reforms that we're placing in place and so forth are helping the prisoners that they can help. But we also are very realistic about the fact that there are people who need to be incarcerated, some of them the rest of their lives. I will say regarding crime that violent crime has gone down under my watch, and I attribute that to our willingness as the sheriff's office to collaborate with all agencies, all public sectors, whether it's police agencies, whether it's help agencies, wherever there's an opportunity for us to step in and say, what can we help with? How can our uniformed people impact what the problem is that you have in your community or in the communities that we serve? Because I have 12 townships that we are embedded in, 12. And our deputies are out there in the cruisers as law enforcement officers enforcing laws. And one of the things I did when I came in is I insisted that our deputies work. I mean, COVID hit, and quite frankly, a lot of law enforcement kind of stood down, and we understood why initially. But now COVID has waned off, right? And now you have to get those people back to the idea that, look, you have to sometimes pull people over for speeding. You have to, make people accountable for following traffic rules. And what we've seen recently is this uptick in people being hit, crashes because people are distracted driving, the speeding, those kinds of things. Now, we do have a no chase policy, all right? So while we're not going to chase vehicles, we can identify those vehicles and we can circle back and find those people. And oftentimes, people that aren't used to now having us police the highways, they will pull over, and they are warned and they are told, listen, you got to slow down now. We're paying attention. So those kinds of things are happening, and that is to the betterment of preventing crime. Really, it's crime prevention. I will say that as far as the jail goes, I'm still working on improving that jail and improving the food, improving the lives of people who are living inside that jail. Under the prior administration, the infrastructure was crumbling. I mean, it just was. The door locks in the jail weren't working. So the cell locks for the doors on the cells weren't working. So there was no way to isolate people or make them accountable with a particular time of locking them in or something like that. And I am now fixing all of those jail locks, the peeling paint, the just things like that. We are now doing that. We're painting, we're improving not just the environment for people who live here as incarcerated individuals, like safe and clean. That's what I want them to live in, right? But also for our officers, the men and women that work in this facility and work out there in law enforcement, they are embedded in these areas, and they day to day are also inside that jail. I want them to have clean and safe working environments. And quite frankly, when I came on, even the chairs they sat in were just because those chairs get a lot of use because we're sitting at a control panel, we're watching cameras, we're doing things like that along with walking around. And my God, the chairs were falling apart, and they were torn. And so I replaced all of those. A part of doing it sounds like a small thing, but a part of doing that is letting officers know that I value their work and I value them, and I'm cleaning up their workspaces and painting their workspaces. I go to graduations because we are continuing to sign people on and and work to bring our numbers up, because everyone has struggled in the past few years here now with people wanting or not wanting to be in uniform. And when I do address with the last class that we graduated, oh my gosh, it was almost 40 people that we graduated, 40 men and women, and we had 300 people at our graduation. 300. That's unprecedented. And what it tells me is the support that we are getting from the public because of our outreach, because of who we're hiring, because of our messaging. And part of that messaging for me, when I talk to the moms, dads, friends, etc., of these young men and women who are coming on board, is I tell them this: listen, hard job, yes. Will you see trauma? Yes. Will you be involved in trauma? Yes. But one of the things I'm going to do for these people in uniform is I'm going to celebrate their service. I'm going to celebrate them. And that's what I've been doing. I created an awards committee so that when people do good things, and they're constantly doing great things in uniform, that we are rewarding that with awards. We're pushing it out in the media. We're pushing it out on our Facebook, and we're letting the public know what it's like to be an enforcement officer and the kinds of heroic things that our enforcement people do. And by that same token, when someone does something wrong, when someone does something inappropriate, I also own that, because I am the leader. Starts here, stops here. And, I take great pride in the fact that our officers have turned a corner regarding culture, and we are just doing very great things, very, very well in the environments we work in.
Charmaine, I was thinking now might be a good time to tell them about the ABLE program, because that's so much a part of changing the culture.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan. So our ABLE program that Susan's referring to, this program was written at Georgetown University by people who are criminal justice professionals, lifelong professionals. And the program is called ABLE, Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement. And what that boils down to is, in real terms, is any officer, I don't care what your rank, you're a deputy, you're a sworn deputy of this department, if you see a situation where any of our officers are abusing someone in some way, or maybe tempers have flared and things are getting out of hand, right? And that person can be of rank. It can be a person who's had 20 years on and you only have one. You are encouraged to and allowed to intervene in that situation, to say stop, right? To grab people apart, to intervene and make sure that, just like the George Floyd incident, hey, take your knee off that guy's neck and make sure that happens. And, I try to point out to people, because I've been in the business so long, I know exactly why those men and women standing around there in uniform while that officer was kneeling on George Floyd's neck. I know exactly why they didn't intervene, because their departments didn't encourage it. They don't encourage it. They haven't encouraged it. That has been the standard status quo for decades and decades. If you intervene in a situation as a young officer, somebody with no rank, etc., you are going to become the target of harassment. You are going to be seen in a very, very bad light. It can affect your career, etc. You're terrified, right? And the ABLE program takes that scenario and turns it completely around and says, listen, I don't care if you're one day on the job. If you see something happening like that, get yourself in there and help fix it. And the other thing I do with that training, and every one of our men and women in uniform have had that training, by the way, it's 8 hours of training and it's excellent training. I'm wearing the ABLE pin right here. So that's the pin that officers get when they take the training. And we've had many officers intervene now since we brought this in 2021. The county commissioners brought it forward, and I made it happen in the department. And since that time, I have celebrated lots of men and women. I give them commendations. I give them coins. I pat them on the back. I encourage that. And when people see that, they know that they cannot target that person because that person spoke up. And that's changing the culture. That's an example of it. And that's how ABLE training works.
Thank you.
Sure.
Now, did you have something else, or do you want me to?
Well, if you want to cue me, Susan, to anything that y'all had on your agenda, I can also talk about, I noticed when I looked over the questions, some of these questions that had been posed about the makeup of our jail. Right. So, beyond the felonies, as I said, we're dealing with a very different type of person now who's incarcerated. I would say, and these are pretty accurate statistics, but they're general, and that is about 60%, more than 60%, about 65% of the prisoners, the men in this jail, are African American. They are Black men, 65%. We have a much smaller percentage of women, who are African American. And then we have, percentages of addiction and things like that. I would say 70%, about 70%, that's a lot, of the people who are incarcerated are struggling with some kind of addiction. Yeah. Be it drugs, be it alcohol, something is driving their bad behavior. Some people just plain struggle with life. And then there's the portion of mental illness, and that's 40% of our population. 40% of our population struggles with mental illness. And, and many of those people also have drug and alcohol related issues. We do have a medical staff here that is we have a couple of doctors, we have a psychiatrist, we have a general physician, we bring in a dentist, we have nurses who, of course, pass out medication and things like that. And then we also have, an RN who's in charge of that program, and administrators and so forth. And, one of the things that I think the future of jails holds for us is this medical piece. You know, people who, my office is right next to the fire department, just so you know. But people who struggle with medical illnesses, with mental health illnesses, but also physical illnesses, and many of them are in here. They haven't taken care of themselves. They don't go to the doctor regularly. They don't go to the dentist. They don't pay attention to their physical health, and they don't feel good typically, right? We deal with a lot of people in this institution who are prone to have seizures, people who have high blood pressure, people who, because of drugs, have destroyed lots of their immune systems and so forth. So, trying to make those people healthy, I think, is the future of jails. We want to physically restore you, and then we can start also mentally and life skills restoration. So, so there's lots of work to be done. And, we're doing it. We're doing it in this jail. But safety is our concern. Safety for the community is my concern. And I'll talk about that, at large. I sold the helicopters. We had 2 helicopters, and we'd had them for decades. They were costing us millions. And, we were very rarely using them anymore, honestly. We had a helicopter pilot, 1 or 2 even, on staff, on payroll to fly those copters. And, what we figured out is, they're really much more outdated now. And you're not going to conduct surveillance with them. We don't jump onto roofs with them. We've never done that, never trained to do that. We don't do water rescue with our helicopter. We've never trained to do that. And so we decided, what, let's sell them. Let's sell them, and let's do this. Let's buy drones. All right. Drones are a fraction of the cost. When you're looking at over a 3-year period, we had spent $5 million on those helicopters. Okay. Drones cost us, the highest end drone we bought to begin with was $10,000, right? And they do go up from there as they become more sophisticated, and we're buying those. But in general, when you look at the benefits of having a drone program, so right now we have 15. We have 15 drones. They're in the trunk of these people's car, these officers. And here's the difference. If we have a child lost in the woods, right? It takes us a half hour to get to the helicopter, right? And then another, 15 minutes to get it out. By the time the helicopter's gotten there, it's an hour later, versus a radio call comes out. Our deputy, who's in a vehicle in that vicinity, drives to that location, puts the drone up in 5 minutes. And now the drone has infrared so that we can see at night with it. We can detect heat and so forth all during the day. It has a camera system that is far better than what we had on the helicopter. We can surveil with the drone. When that horrible incident happened and that young girl was killed in Silverton, there were 3 men that were responsible for that. And we caught those 3 men in 2 days. And one of the tools that helped us do that was the drone. We put that drone 400 feet in the air. They couldn't even see it. They didn't even know it was there. And we were watching them. Not only were we watching them with a camera, with a drone, but we were able to zoom down and literally get the number off the apartment door that they were in, and that helped us realize where they had the guns, someone that came and got them, when they were leaving the location, who they were, etc. So, that is a program that, 1, is very fiscally responsible, but 2, it's the wave of the future. It's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to start using drones. And when we talk about car chases, because a police chase is very dangerous to everybody, right? So the technology that's coming, and I mean, it's here. I'm not talking, years down the road. I mean, we're working with it now, getting it on board, is for us to be following a vehicle, okay, and the vehicle won't pull over. So we have the capability, we're going to soon have the capability to shoot like a dart, right? And it sticks to the bumper of that car, and it has GPS. So our officer attaches the dart to the car close enough to do that, because we can fire a dart and we can hit an object that's, not, I mean, it doesn't have to be just 5 feet in front of us. It can even be further. And we can shoot that dart. It attaches. And now we can back off and we can monitor where that GPS is taking us. And we can radio across, hey, now they're turning into this driveway at this location, etc. So those are things that technology is bringing to us, and we are taking, full advantage of that for the safety of the community. You know, a part of that too is, as I said, violence is down, and that is our goal. We don't want to tolerate people who come to our community and break into our stores and and create havoc and alarm and hurt people. We don't want to tolerate that. So we also have a particular type of surveillance called flock cameras, and we're getting those cameras out. And people will say it's Big Brother, but the flock cameras are very specific. They only hold information for a short period of time. But what they will do is, if you're driving down the road and somebody crashes into you, all right, and then they take off, and you're left with, oh, wow, I wish I could have even got that license plate, but I couldn't, right? But you do realize it was a black car, it was an SUV, you might have even gotten the make of the car, and you do know that it has front end damage on the right, front end where it hit you. So when you call that in, our deputies can get on our flock system and they can literally type in black SUV, right front end damage, and then if you have the make, and every black SUV with front end damage will pull up right now on the screen. We'll be able to see in real time exactly where that car is, and we will then be able to apprehend that person, and follow that person. So those are technology enhancing things that they're going to make us safer.
Good job. So going back to the statistics about the jail, somebody was wondering if you had any idea about the percentages of people that maybe are awaiting trial, that have already been convicted and they're staying in jail, or if they're
right. And that's a great question. By nature, the jail is going to house more than half the people that are in jail. I'd say a good 60% of people in jail are pretrial. They are awaiting trial. They're waiting for maybe a bond hearing. They're waiting for something like that. They've been incarcerated. They typically do have a bond. And, the other percentage of that, if you break it down, if I say 60, then the other 40% is people who have been sentenced, and maybe they're sentenced to incarceration here in jail, or they're sentenced and they're waiting to go to prison, right? So they're waiting to go to prison, or they're waiting for particular hearings, parole hearings, etc. They're brought back from prison. They're waiting for maybe some kind of retrial or some kind of legal thing that they're involved in. So those are the demographics.
How many people are actually sentenced to serve out their sentence in jail rather than prison? And like, what is the longest time that somebody has spent in your jail?
Well, those are great questions. And, first I'll say this, jails are designed to hold people who are sentenced to 18 months or less of incarceration. 18 months or more, that means you're going to prison, right? Now, they manufactured and changed a few nuances in the law, et cetera, here regarding felony fours and felony fives, things like that, different levels of felonies that people could be convicted of. And they're trying to push some of those prison people back to our jails, right? Now, I will say that in the days of old, we had quite a few people in this jail who were sentenced to 6 months, 3 months, 10 days, that kind of thing, even 5 days in jail. Typically now, judges are using other community controls for people who are low level enough to get a 5-day jail sentence. They're using electronic monitoring. They're using other means to keep these people out of jail. As far as the average sentence in jail, the average stay for an actual jail sentence, it is going to be about 6 months. 6 to 8 months is pretty typical of a stay in jail if you are getting time. Now, as far as people and the maximum amount of time they spend here, we had a guy that was incarcerated for 8 years here in our jail. 8 years. He was accused of murder, and he was manipulating the criminal justice system. He continued to fire his attorneys after they got to certain points, and then they'd have to start all over again. And he did that well enough that when it really, when it came down to, okay, he can't fire any more attorneys, the judge retired. So the judge on that case retired, so they had to start all over. So he manipulated the system, and there are other guys that do that same thing, and they'll spend 2 years here, 3 years here. But I have to tell you, that's an anomaly. That just typically does not happen in jails. And, a lot of times when these guys do get sentenced, I tell you, almost always, they want to get out of here. Jail is hard time. It's much harder time than prison. You have a lot more freedoms in prison. In jail, you are much more confined. You don't have the availability of the kinds of visits that you could do in prison and things like that. In prison, they'll even let you wear, some of your own clothing, blue jeans, etc. So here, jail is hard time, and most people want to get out of here.
I would think so.
Yeah, you know that, Susan. You've been walking through some jails in your day.
That's right. So has the bail project, do you think, been effective? How often has it been used? Do you have any inmates designated without bail?
Well, I'm super glad you brought that up because, excuse me, it's been a long day. I'm super glad you brought that up because the bail project, I brought the bail project in. I embraced them. I said, hey, whatever it is we can do to help you do what you do. Well, I was astounded at the number. They have bonded out 400 people in the time that I've been, in this 3-year span. And they've bonded those people out. And this is what's staggering, okay, is that, and they can prove this because they have statistics and so forth, 90% of the people that they helped bond out showed up for their court date. That's significant. That's truly something that is reforming the system. Because there are a lot of people that get bonds, and then for whatever reason they don't make it to court. Well, then that gums up the entire system. Plus, it influences the judge to think, hey, I can't trust this person. This person isn't going to follow the law or the rule. And oftentimes, not often, but times, there are times when people just can't get to court. Maybe they're working. People's lives aren't as organized as we'd like them to be, and they forget. They lose their wherever their paperwork is of where they're supposed to go. They're not motivated to get there, and the bail bond project works on that. That's what they do. They call these people, they get them to court.
So
For
it's
those
been
of us who
truly,
don't, Susan, excuse me, for those of us who don't know what the bail project is, can one of you just kind of define it quickly? Because not everybody knows what that is.
Sure.
I don't-
Susan, do you want
no,
to
you do
take
it.
that?
You go right ahead. But it's been truly successful.
Yeah. So the bail project is it is a group of people who are funded sometimes through 501c, sometimes through different government grants, etc. And their job is they have a pot of money, right? And their job is to monitor people who are brought to jail for whatever reason. And they are tied into our pretrial people who, if somebody came to jail, that person is going to get in front of a pretrial clerk, who's going to enter their information. Do you have a job? Yes. Do you have children? Yes. And they're going to ask them those questions, and as long as the crime that they are accused of or brought to jail for is not a violent crime, if the judge sets a 10% bond on $1,000, that's $100. Well, $100 for many of us is doable. We can come up with that. But there are a lot of people that can't.
Right.
And if you can't come up with $100 and you have 2 kids at home and you actually do have a job, etc., we want you, because you are pretrial, you have not been convicted of a crime or accused of something violent. We want you to be able to get out of jail, pay that bond, and that's what bail bonds does. Bail bond project will pay that bail. They'll come in, attach themselves to that person, pay the bail, get that person out of jail, and then continue to monitor where that person is and help get them through the criminal justice system. And perhaps the person comes back to court and is convicted. There's all kinds of scenarios.
Mhm.
But the main thing is that initially when you're brought to jail for a low-level crime, you have the ability to get out if your bond is low and take care of your business.
Because
Okay.
if you're kept in jail because you can't pay $100, you lose your job. Oftentimes you lose your family,
Right.
you lose your home.
Right.
You don't
Right.
have time to get a lawyer. You don't have time to fight your conviction. So it's nuts. And we're trying to get more people to embrace the bail project. The judges didn't at all at first. I don't know, are the judges more conducive with the bail project?
Yeah, they are. Judges are absolutely.
It sounds like a good thing.
Yeah, judges are much more on board, and they are most certainly allowing these things to take hold when they make sense. When they make sense for the safety and the good of the community,
Right.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Susan.
Dot has a question. Dot, you're on mute.
I was wondering how many kids come through the system who end up being charged as adults rather than as juveniles.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't have the statistics on that. And one of the reasons I don't is because I do not have any jurisdiction over the juvenile system. The juvenile system is very separate from what I do as the sheriff. Now, I will tell you that years past, decades past, we would house juveniles that were charged as adults in a unit that we had in the jail. They were isolated. They were in that unit. And typically, that was a 8 to 16 person unit. Now, I don't know that it was ever always filled, but there were, juveniles there in that unit. But now they cannot be housed in the jail unless there's special circumstances, and they are charged as adults. Now, I do know that there are some juveniles here of late that they're talking about charging them as adults. And again, Carrie Bloom, Judge Bloom, could much more answer that question than I can.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So one of our members wanted to talk about, and I'm not sure if you know about this, but I do have the information if you don't, talk about voting rights for incarcerated persons.
Yes. And we are very concerned about making sure that incarcerated people do get the ability to vote, do have the ability to vote, and that's explained to them. And it is. We have organizations that come in, and Susan, you may have more specific information about who those people are, but I have entertained many conversations and allowed different people to come into our facility to make this happen, and we have a very robust system for voting. Do you want to expand on that, Susan?
Yeah, for registering voters. One of the things that people wondered is the rights of felons and misdemeanors. And so if you've convicted of a misdemeanor, you are able to vote. You should check your voter registration to make sure that it's current, and you can request an absentee ballot from the administrator of whatever complex you're in. And if you have a felony conviction, if you have served your time, if you're on probation or parole, you can vote. So you just have to make sure that you haven't been your voting rights have not been revoked in another state, because then if you do vote in Ohio, it's a crime. But I mean, felons, after they've served their time or they're on probation or parole, they can vote, and misdemeanors also can vote. So it's really important that we let people in prison and jails know that, so they can get registered to vote. And we so appreciate your allowing your inmates to register to vote, Charmaine. So that's another wonderful thing that you do. So this is an easy question. Have you improved the turnover of the staff? You offer more training for your staff. I'd like you to tell them about the paid training that you do for recruits now.
Sure. So, yes, we have improved our staff, and we do have a much higher retention rate because of some of the changes that we've made. When I came in, I changed the staffing model. So our staffing model in the past, for all of the history of the sheriff's office, was that if you wanted to become a certified police officer in the state of Ohio, you wanted to carry a gun, have powers of arrest, work on road patrol, etc. If you wanted to be a person to do that, you had to put yourself through school. You had to pay for the academy, you had to pay for your own equipment, and you typically worked part-time. These are young people coming into the business. And, that's how hundreds of us in the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office became certified. We did that on our own. And, I knew that was a bad system. It was poorly done. And I decided that to change our staffing model and motivate people to come to this department, I'm sending them to the academy on our dime, our time. So no more of this, you have to work full time and go to school full time, right? Because it takes 6 to 8 months to get through the academy. I mean, you sacrifice a lot to do that. So I take 20 people at a time and I send them to Great Oaks Police Academy, and we have a contract. I pay the bill. Now, the only thing these people have to do is sign that they will stay here for a certain amount of time, right? Because it's $10,000 or so to send someone through an academy if you pay for it individually. Now we get a rate, right? So we've less than that invested, but if they get a job within a 3-year period, another job somewhere else, then they have to pay us back. And that's in the contract, and people do. the people that have left, and not many have left. I mean, they go through that academy, and there are lots of them that stay and serve on our road patrol and stay in our jail. But those are officers that can go out and do off-duty details for security around the city and all the different things that you can hire them to do. So in that way, I'm not just helping the sheriff's office, but I'm helping the entire community by putting more police officers out there.
Okay.
Wow.
And something I want to talk about while you're looking at questions, and then I'll take any more questions.
Oh, yeah, no, by all means.
Is I wanted to mention to people something that you may not know, and that is I do have I established when I came on a helpline. So it's a call center. It's with the Community Affairs Unit, and it is live, real people that answer the phone. And the number is 513-946-6565. And when you call that number, an actual live person will answer the phone. They will walk you through whatever question or issue you have regarding the criminal justice system. And people call for all manner of reasons, right? Because people don't know how to navigate this system. If you have somebody that you know is incarcerated, you want to help them, you don't know where to even send a letter. You don't know how to arrange a visit. Or you might not know for yourself, hey, I forgot what courtroom I'm supposed to go to, or my court date, or do I have a warrant? I heard I had a warrant for my arrest. I mean, there's a lot of things. If you have someone here who needs medication, and we can connect you directly to medical to say, hey, they want to talk to you about Johnny and he needs this, that, and the other thing. And the family member can make those, that connection. We've had, in the 3+ years that we've had that call center operating, you guys, we've had 100,000 calls.
Wow.
Now, some of those calls are 2 minutes. Some of those calls are 20 minutes. Some are 5. Some are, it's all manner of issues and things. But people to think about is, where were all those questions being answered prior to that? Who was handling those inquiries, right? Because they weren't. And when you talk about people being frustrated and upset with the criminal justice system, the jail, police, etc., sometimes it's just because they can't get access. They've done nothing wrong, but they certainly need access to try and help the person who has done something wrong. There's lots of ways that call center really de-escalates how the community feels about the police. And we get tons of compliments about that. I'll brag on another point. I recently went to, and you might have seen it in the news, I think Channel 9 did a clip on it, but the White House drug czar, White House, official came down, and his purpose of being here was to preview our addiction programs in the tri-state. Not just our addiction programs, but what I started in the jail, okay? What morphed out to be our quick response team to overdoses on the outside, the coroner's office and what the coroner is doing, and all of these collaborations. And he left that meeting and he literally made the statement to the press. He said, I haven't seen anything like this in the nation. I mean, in the nation. And, it makes me very proud, because I'll tell you, the first thing I said when I took office 3 years ago, I told these men and women, it was one of the first things I said, we are going to be a sheriff's office that is a model for the state of Ohio and then the nation. And we are well on our way. I mean, we have done so many things that are cutting edge that people are taking notice. I mean, this individual from the White House came down to visit us because he's heard about us. Mm-hmm. We have a decrease in overdose deaths, and that's something that's not happening in other places.
Right. The Hamilton County Addiction Collaborative, is that what it's called now?
Yes.
Yeah. They have done some amazing things, and you are part of that, as are many other groups. So,
Yes.
So this is a question that probably is more of a state question, but one of our members asked this. What do we do about all those people that are incarcerated on the marijuana rap since Ohio passed its marijuana legalization law, which I know is not really gone into effect yet. And I also know that there's really nothing you can do about it. But that was the question.
Yeah. And so let me be clear on the question. It's what are we going to do with people that are already incarcerated for marijuana?
Right, right. And there's nothing in the law that deals with that.
No. And that, of course, that's really a judicial question.
Exactly.
I mean, those are questions that are surrounding sentencing, questions that surround maybe people getting new trials, new court dates, whatever that is going to mean for the judges. And I do feel for them because that's a big old spider web. But yeah, the marijuana situation and the laws surrounding that are not in my preview. I'm here to follow the law, enforce the law, and that is simply what I do. So, so it's a great question, though.
I mean, that's all you can do. I might say that, one of the, I read about it a little bit. One of the lawyers did say that what he thinks will happen, and judges have 30 days to figure out what they're going to do with this statute, is that most people that have been incarcerated on marijuana charges, the quantities are larger than what they're dealing with in the legalization law. So they probably will still be left in jail or prison or wherever they are. So there may be some that are less that, could go after an expungement. But at this point, it doesn't look like anything's going to happen in the state of Ohio. And in Illinois, it did. And they expunged 800,000 people. But in Ohio, because we do have a Republican legislature, it does not look as if that would have a chance of happening. So, again, it has nothing to, I know it has to do with the state and judges. So, all right, I would like to open it up to all of our attendees to see if anybody has any questions, any other questions than what we've talked about, unless you have something else. Charmaine, did you have anything else to talk about? I know one thing we didn't mention was the fact you talked about technology outside with the drones, but you didn't talk about what you've done with technology inside. There was no technology virtually in the jail when you got there.
Right. So, yeah, the technology we were using to book people in and create data here in the jail was 30 years old. 30. Oh my. I mean, my God, I petitioned the commissioners and we got funding. They approved funding for us to revamp that system. It's going to be, one, cheaper to operate, but two, it's going to be so much more geared to collecting data and then being able to use that data quantitatively to figure out, what's the future hold? What direction should we go in? I mean, someone here had a question regarding data, like, how many black men are in your jail? What neighborhood are they from? What are their crimes, etc. We have very little of that data in our 30-year-old database. And the data that is there, we can't get it out because the database is so old. So, we're working to bring that on and making changes. And I'm also pushing the court to join us. I would like the judicial system, the prosecutor's office, public defenders to join in and give us your data. Let's find out what's really going on in the criminal justice system. Why should there be secrets? That's what I want to know.
Exactly.
Why? And so that's working. Yeah. Thanks, Susan.
Yeah, you are not able to get any information from the judicial system. I mean,
no,
your systems do not at all pull us with each other.
Right. I mean, they have to be willing to tell me, and they're
Yeah.
not. And they're, and I'm just a plain talker, and I just say it like it is, So we're going to continue to push that, though. I promise you
Yeah.
that.
And I know the Community Advisory Board is going to continue to push that too.
Yes. And Community Advisory Board is helping us with that. Thank you. Yes.
So anybody have, Beth, you have a question?
Yes, I want to say, first of all, thank you for all the positive changes that you've made, Madam Sheriff.
Sure.
And I don't know if you've been there long enough to comment on whether the rehabilitation efforts that you have invested in has affected recidivism at all, or are you seeing the same people come back over and over? And another question that I have is, are there any success stories that you would like to share about people who you think you have been able to turn around and put on a good path?
Sure. Well, as far as your first question of, this recidivism rate and those kinds of things, again, we have to wait on the data. I don't have the data to quantify that. The courts do, I have to know who was sentenced and when, and even our database here has some of that information, but right now we can't access it. But we're going to access it. And I just signed on to cooperate with a national program called Justice Counts, and they are all about data, and they're collecting it from everywhere, and they're going to help us with that endeavor. The second part of your question regarding success stories, sure, we've had success stories. I personally know that when I created the Women's Heroin Recovery Unit back when I was the major, there are still 10 or 15 women that went through that program that are still clean today. They created a group, and it was a successful program in that way. And my whole goal in that program was simply to keep them busy and, change the way that they viewed themselves and viewed life. And I think we did that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any questions in the chat, but I have a question I want to ask you. You mentioned some of the new things that you've already accomplished, but what is still on your wish list? What are the big projects that are still out there that you wish you could take on right now?
Wow. Well, data is one. That's on my wish list. I want to get the stockholders to the table, right? I want to bring the judges to the table. I want to bring the prosecutor's office to the table, and I want them to cooperate. I want them to get on board with what it is we're looking at. The other thing I want to do is I want to convince the legislators in Ohio that their archaic viewpoints about people owning guns are ridiculous, and that they are, they're really responsible for deaths in the state of Ohio, deaths by firearm, because they did away with the concealed carry requirements. And they basically, they have said anybody can carry a concealed weapon. Now you're not supposed to be able to as a juvenile, but how do you know? Right? I mean, no police officer is going to walk up and start checking IDs on some of these young men who look like, look like they're 20 because they're muscular and big and so forth. And they could be 18, they could be 16. So, if there's a frustration for me, it's absolutely that. I went up and testified against that permitless carry, and I continue to speak off about it. So there's those things for the future.
Well, I appreciate that too. That it's interesting to hear a law enforcement agent person say that the legislature is not doing their job as well as they might.
I would say quite a few of them will do that.
That's good. That is good that they're speaking out. Another question I was thinking about listening to you talk, I'm realizing my own kind of ignorance. I know more about what the police officers do because I'm on a neighbor.
Janet, you're breaking up. Yep.
You
Can't hear you.
froze.
Can't hear you, Janet. So your internet is bad. But let me ask.
Council and the police come every month and they talk to us and they tell us crimes. It's like our policemen. Do you? I mean,
No, you
so
completely broke
can you
up.
talk a little bit about? And I know there's different duties, whether you work at the Justice Center or you're on the streets. But can you talk a little bit about the kind of average the work that the various officers might be doing?
So yes, and I think I got the gist of your question. You kind of froze up there in the middle, but basically there are officers who, for the
Yeah,
city of
I'm having
Cincinnati,
some questions. Yeah.
for the city of Cincinnati, they're out there patrolling the city. All right, the various neighborhoods in the city, and those
Mm-hmm.
officers are there for enforcement purposes. And a lot of what they do is reactionary. Quite frankly, they get called to a scene.
Mm-hmm.
They may witness a crime in progress. There are officers who in the city who are designated as detectives who investigate the crimes, etc., bring those people to justice and testify to the evidence, etc. And uh, in our department, I have, my department touches every facet of the criminal justice system. So the officers that I have, the deputies out there on patrol, those deputies are tasked with not just preventing crime by being there, patrolling, etc., apprehending criminals, but they're also tasked with community engagement. So I want them out. I want them out. I want them talking to people. I want them using good manners. Um, you know, I want them to be focused on de-escalation, what that is, and they get to know their areas very well. For instance, in Silverton, there's a particular part of the neighborhood that happens to have a lot of people who are disabled in some way living there, either in apartment buildings, etc. So our deputies know when they respond there that they're using some of their skills, some of their other skills they're trained for. We have a domestic violence task force and gun violence prevention that I am involving, deputies in so that they can help us with what they've seen out there and what we can do about it. So I think that was your question. I hope I answered it.
Yes. Yes, I did freeze up a bit there, but that is helpful just to know. I mean, I understand that there are differences in the duties and the responsibilities of the two law agencies, and it's just helpful for those of us who are not part of the criminal justice system or trained in this to understand those differences. Yeah, because I don't usually, I don't know the last time I actually encountered a Hamilton County officer in just the course of my daily life, but I know they're out there doing good things for us.
Well, that's because you see a lot of Cincinnati. So, Michelle, did you have a question?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Hi, yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, this
Hi.
is when I just logged on. Hi, Sheriff McGuffey and everyone, and I apologize. I'm using my husband's laptop while mine's in the shop. First, I couldn't hear anybody. Now I hear everybody, but I can't see you. So
okay.
I know I'm talking to a group here, but thank you for this opportunity. I was just typing in the chat that actually Sheriff McGuffey, along with Mary Carol Melton, has pushed our organization for the past 7 years to make this office eligible for what we call our Gun Sense Candidate Questionnaire. And this is an 11 campaign that we have run. It's part of our election work for since, say, 2015, 2016. And they have expanded. We were happy to announce they have finally listened to our sheriff and other sheriffs across the nation. And this office is absolutely eligible. And we could not be more thrilled because although we have not evaluated yet the questionnaire, our Sheriff McGuffey has, of course, filled this questionnaire out. I know that the results are going to be nothing but positive. Once Sheriff McGuffey and any of our candidates running for office from the presidential level to the local, now we've expanded it that much. Once they receive this gun sense distinction status, they are listed on our public website for voters to be able to go to this site and find out what candidates that are running for office actually stand on a gun violence prevention platform. That they not only are running on it, they are, basically living it. If they're already elected, are trying to pass gun safety legislation like background checks and permits for all CCW carriers, etc. Anything that is a strong piece of gun safety legislation that sadly Ohio no longer has. These individuals running for office will be known on the GunSenseVoter.org site. And a voter, if this is an important issue to you, gun violence prevention, they can go to this website and actually see which candidates on their ballot have passed this particular questionnaire, our Gun Sense candidate questionnaire. And of course, very excited. I'm sure we'll be announcing as candidates are filling this out, adding them to that website. So for us as individuals, volunteers, Moms in Action, it's going to be a huge campaign for us, 2024. We have President Biden, by the way, did fill it out and he passed. It's on top of the ticket, Gun Sense candidate, and Kamala Harris. As these results come in, that allows our volunteers to be able to work for them and canvas, phone bank, whatever they need to work their campaigns. So we're excited about that, and I have to hand it to Mary Carol Melton and Sheriff McGuffey for. She kept asking me several years, why can't we fill out this particular questionnaire? And it just was really a matter of we had to get the program expanded to have the personnel that were going to monitor this, our political affairs department. So thank you for that. And again, just know that Sheriff McGuffey literally drives to the State House with us. Our Moms Demand Action volunteers, she sat there for hours and hours in her turn to testify, and she testifies against all of these dangerous gun bills introduced or weakened. So we sure appreciate her. She's we like to call her Ohio Sheriff, Moms Demand Action
Thank
Sheriff.
you.
Oh, that's great.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much.
Hey, let me ask you, maybe this is the last question, but on a personal level, this was a question from Eileen. How do you separate work and personal time? Do you ever really have downtime? Do you ever get away from those phone calls?
Wow, that's a great question. I will tell you that yes, it is difficult to separate work and personal time because, as the sheriff, I really am 24/7 on duty. I mean, that actually is in the law. So, but I will say this, and I've always had a very strong work ethic, which is why I'm sitting where I am today.
Right.
Even as I was working as a young deputy, I mean, there was no task that I ever turned down or that I ever did halfway, I enjoyed my job. I love doing the job. But I will tell you that the downtime that I do get, which is very necessary because you do have to keep your sanity, amongst all this busyness. I get that because I have great people working on my command staff. And, I can't say enough about Mary Carol. Mary Carol works for this department as a consultant. And oftentimes, it really is her job to kind of pick up any of the balls that look like they're going to drop, right? And she does that very well. I have a chief deputy who works just as hard as I do. The command staff, 10 people, an attorney on board. I have, a public information officer. So, a major of the jail. So I have people who, I just really couldn't ask for a better team. They were hand selected by me, by the way. And I'm very proud of that because it's because of them that I do get a week away here and there. I try to, I go camping, I get some downtime so that I can be fresh for, lots of reasons, as you might know. In this public arena, I knew I would, I've always worked in a public arena, but I have to say that this job and the way I'm doing this job really does put me out in front a lot more than any other sheriffs that have ever held this position, any of the other men that have ever held this position. I don't turn down media. I don't turn down requests for interviews. Many of them did, and they played, they held things close to the vest and did that thing where I'm law enforcement, so I'll tell you what I want you to know when I want you to know it. Well, those days are long gone. And now I work for all of you. And so, yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate it. But yeah, it's my staff. The staff gives me time.
It's like being Taylor Swift. You have a camera on you all the time.
All the time. That's funny.
And I have one more question I'd like to ask, kind of going back to the beginning. We know you've been working in law enforcement some 30 years, but one question I'm curious about, what brought you to it in the first place? And what was the genesis of you deciding that I'm going to grow up and be someday the sheriff of Hamilton County?
Well, I decided early on I wanted to be a police officer when I was 14 even, so I've had that dream a very long time. I had to work for it. At that time, women were not allowed to be police officers. That's
Right.
the absolute truth. I never believed that even one day. I was never going to be told that I couldn't do something I wanted to do. Part of that was me being stubborn. Part of that was I came from a long line of Germans. But at any rate, I will say that as a child growing up, I was an at-risk kid. My mom worked tremendously hard, long hours, because she was a single parent. Our dad was just not in the picture at all, and nor should he have been in the end. And so she raised us, and we were, we had to help out. We had to be on our own and do responsible things. But what I found out pretty early on in life, when I was just a kid, was depending on what little group you were hanging around with in your neighborhood, whatever kid was in charge of that group for whatever reason, they were the oldest or the meanest or the loudest or whatever, whoever that kid was depended on whether you were going to have a good day or a bad day. And, I decided then, and that was my lesson in social justice. I decided then, listen, I want to have good days. And so I want to be that kid that's in charge because I want to have a good day and I want to make sure it happens. So that was, that's how I felt from really the get-go. And then it just kind of built, it built over the years into who I am now.
Lucky for us.
Exactly. I am grateful that you have succeeded to the point where you are. I mean, literally, we have a new sheriff in town, and I think we all feel a little bit safer because of that, and that's a good thing. I can vouch that your office is very approachable. I called to get some general information, and every person I spoke to down to when I was writing up publicity for this, and the first person said, "Well, I don't really know this, but let me give you this person," and I think I talked to 5 different people, but every one of them was extremely helpful and extremely gracious and willing and open. And I said, what's your current population? I got the printout right here, and he rattles it off. So I will vouch that they are well trained and very open and very welcoming to us. So I want to thank everyone here tonight for coming, but I also want to make sure that I thank our committee. The program committee works very hard to think of good ideas for programs and then put them together and make them happen. So in addition to Jeff, who has been doing our tech, and Susan, who's done a wonderful job as always of moderating, I want to thank Sarah Gideons, who does a lot of our publicity, David Siders for all his good ideas and connections, Jan Seymour, who wrote a lot of those questions for tonight, March Davis, who's here with us by phone, and Laurie Frank and Amy Katzman. These are the people who work hard all year long to bring good programs to you. And I want to really invite everyone. I hope you're really curious to see some of those wonderful reforms that Sheriff McGuffey has talked about and see what a clean and safe jail looks like. We are going to be going down to the Justice Center on Wednesday, April 3rd at 4:30 in the afternoon. We'll be having more information about where do we actually meet, like at what door or whatever, on the street and go in. But Women's City Club is going down for a tour, and I believe that the sheriff herself is leading this tour. Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Awesome.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Yes.
do this. Hopefully you have not had the opportunity to be in the Justice Center before. And this is a good way to go see it in a good and safe way. I've actually had the opportunity to go down there because I have a relative who has been, shall we say, a frequent flyer in your fine institution, who also, what you said about hard times, she would much rather be in Marysville than in the Hamilton County Justice Center for all the reasons you said about the freedoms and the programs and all that. But she also felt safe and secure while she was there. So please mark your calendars to join us on April 3rd, and especially consider coming to our national speaker program on Friday, March the 22nd. It is always, even if you don't know who Jen White is and you're not sure why you should come, I've been going to these things for 15 years now, and I have never been sorry that I went. I've always been very glad that I went and heard this person. There are amazing opportunities, just like tonight, to be upfront and personal with someone who's doing important work that makes all of our lives better. So unless Jeff or Susan, do you have anything else to say?
No, I think it's 8:30. I don't know what that noise is. It's not me.
And I don't have any noise here either. It's
Yeah,
8:29 on my
I just want to
computer.
make sure that that Charmaine gets home tonight and has a little time at home before she has to go back to work tomorrow. So I think it's time to say thank you so much to Charmaine and Mary Carol, and good night to everybody. And it's been great to have you all here. And thank you. There's been a lot of nice comments in the chats. Everybody really appreciated everything that you said, Charmaine.
And I too join in to thank you for coming with us tonight, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Before April 3rd. Thank you for being here. Thanks all of you.
Yep.